and welcome to Logan Sounds Off, where I talk about books, music, and a whole lot more. I'm your host, Logan Kelly. Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I'm talking to an incredible drummer and really just an incredible musician in general and a massive music fanatic, Johnny Boyle. Hello Johnny, how are you today?
Hiya, Logan. I'm very privileged to be on your podcast. I'm a big fan.
It's brilliant to have you on, Johnny. And I just want to ask you, because you've done a lot of things, so just to sum it up quickly, for those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I've been drumming with bands for 35 years now. I suppose some of the bands that I've been affiliated with are the Frames, PictureHouse, Pugwash, the Duckworth Lewis Method, Marianne Faithful, Lear, Mundy, the classic Beatles, Spring Break. I've been head of drums at BIM Dublin for 12 years, and now I have a new role, which I'm very psyched about, as principal lecturer of drums. So I'm really enjoying that at the moment. So, you know, I, I've been doing this a very long time, and I've been very lucky to have worked with some of the people that I've worked with, who we were chatting about earlier. Um, and I think at the age I'm at now, I'm going to be 50 this year, and I think that's a huge milestone. And as you get a little bit older, you start to kind of, I'd be quite nostalgic by nature, so I'm kind of looking back on my career, really, you know, because well, I don't want to look too far forward because I've much less time as I move forward than I did when I'm looking back, you know.
That's a bit mad to say, but I mean, wow, what a way to put it.
Yeah, well, just so many great memories with so many brilliant people I've rubbed shoulders with, and I could write a book, Logan. I could write a book, and it's been a joy. But that's not to say, when people come on podcasts and they say everything's been a joy. There's certainly moments in your career that can be very difficult and very challenging. You know, because it is a bit like a roller coaster. You can be really busy for 2 or 3 years, and then there might be a lull for 6 months, and then you can be busy again, and there is a lot of uncertainty, and in this industry. But you've got to make a bit of luck for yourself as well. And Ireland's quite a small pool. And you mentioned Fitzcarraldo to me earlier. That's a big record in your house. That was a big record for me too when that came out. And actually, when they were touring that record, that was the first time I met the Frames. I was living in Derry, Northern Ireland, and I was working as a DJ in a club. I wasn't a very good DJ. I was terrible, in fact.
God.
But I got to meet the guys, and we had some mutual friends, and they were just a band I never thought I'd end up playing drums for. And I spent over 4 years with them, and then I came back in 2022 after 14 years, and I did their 32nd anniversary show in the Royal Hospital in Kilmainham, which was just amazing. And 2 months later, we did the Galway Arts Festival. So I never thought the opportunity would present itself again, because Glenn is very much a solo artist now, but the candle for the Frame still burns, and like I say, never thought I'd end up in that band, let alone coming back, after such a lengthy period, but also coming back at 47, 48 years of age and looking at videos of yourself where you're 29 and you're 30, and there's a huge physicality to what drummers do, and the energy and the heaviness that we try, and just the passion that we put into the playing. Coming back to that as you're older, that there was definitely a lot of swimming going on in the gym, you know,
Yeah.
and a lot of practicing. I prepare a lot. I practiced for 3 months for that gig, as in I started kind of playing in the tunes 3 months before the show in May. So by the time I got to rehearsals, I'd done about, a couple of sessions a week, just because they have a lot of material and they do a long show, just under 3 hours. So there's a lot of material to get through. And I think you need to be comfortable, because don't forget, Glenn's a busker. So you don't know what he's going to throw at you up on that stage. And like he did the classic, we were ending a song, and he shouted, he turned around to me, and I was like, what? And he shouted Monument, which is on Fitzcarraldo,
Oh, brilliant
right,
track.
which is a great riff driven song. And but he called it, and the minute he calls it, you've got 5 seconds to reach into the memory banks in your brain and count the song in and play it, and also play a song that we didn't rehearse for the show. So it was one, I think he likes to challenge his drummers a little bit, but he's very spontaneous, and I love that. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is I did a lot of practice so I'd be really comfortable with the songs and just have them played in. So I was, and the physicality being able to play those long shows. So I was in good shape. And what was really nice about it was the guys were super nice to me, and it was just a really really enjoyable show. I really, it was, and as I get older, that could be the last time I play to 20,000 people. I don't, the thing about this business, Logan, is you don't know, you know?
I see. Well, I'm actually going to come back to that gig with the Frames in 2020 because that's very interesting. But for now, I want to start at the start because the way you talk about music, it's incredible. So you've played, as you're saying, with many musicians, including, as you're saying there, the Frames, but also PictureHouse, and you were saying all these different bands earlier. And I sense there's many different musical elements there and different influences there from not only the bands themselves but from you in your drumming style. So my question for you is, growing up, did you, and if you did, specifically, what kind of musical influences did you have? Did you have it from friends and family, or did you have it from musicians at the time?
That's a great question because, sometimes you'll find somebody just picks up an instrument and there's nobody musical in their family and they just have a great gift for it. I was very lucky that my dad played guitar and he sang and he played piano as well. So his mother was a fiddle player in Cayley bands and played piano in Cayley bands. So there was a slight Irish influence, in terms of my dad's side of the family. There was a huge love for traditional Irish music, whereas he was kind of, he loved his Beatles and he loved his Neil Young, and he had great taste in music. Paul Simon was a big one in our house. I was a young kid listening to like Steve Gadd drumming on 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and songs like Late in the Evening, and he'd always, and so I used to sit by the record player and I would play Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon over and over again, and I'd listen to the intro of Time with the clocks ticking and Nick Mason playing this kind of rototom solo, and I was just obsessed with the sound of it. The same way as when Ringo took his drum solo on the B side of Abbey Road, and I just love that as well. And that song opens with "Come Together," and he had a very distinctive style in how he played. So I was listening to these great bands and artists growing up, but they all had brilliant drummers.
Yeah.
Brilliant drummers. So, and you know, when we were teenagers, like the music video was starting to kind of become very popular. Like we didn't have MTV yet, but I'd be hanging around with a few guys and a few girls. We'd be 12 years of age or 10 years of age, and they'd have the tennis rackets out, and we'd be kind of trying to mime the dances from certain pop videos like Cyndi Lauper or whatever was popular at the time. And but I'd always sit back and air drum with my lips like this, and I'd always air drum, and I think I just had a natural kind of affinity for the drums. I just really loved it as an instrument. I was going to piano lessons at the time, and I just didn't like any of my piano teachers. I just felt it was all very rigid, and they weren't very nice people to be around. And I just thought, this isn't what music is about.
Wow.
You
That
know.
that's a very good revelation at a young age to go, this isn't what music's about. And
Yeah, I grew up also just around so many music sessions. My dad used to play in a pub up the Dublin Mountains here called the Blue Light, which I ended up playing for years with the guys from PictureHouse. And we just go up and we'd have a pint and play a few tunes, and it was just really, really enjoyable. because sometimes you're working, you're playing for money, or you might be doing a gig that you don't really want to be doing. Whereas when you just get together with a few friends and you bash out a few Neil Young songs or Crowded House songs or Tom Petty and stuff like that, it's great. It's just great, and it's not dissimilar to I sit in on some trad sessions. There's some great trad sessions in Dublin. I go to them, and I'm really growing to love traditional music even more as I get older.
Yeah, traditional music is incredible. And actually, for anyone who loves traditional music, there's three shows that play on the weekends on RT Radio 1 that I particularly love. PictureHouse at 9 p.m. on Saturday evenings is a really good show for traditional Irish music. You have Folk on One, which is on at 8 p.m. On RT Radio 1. And then you also have The South Wind Blows, which is, sorry, Folk on One is 9 p.m. And then The South Wind Blows will be 10 p.m. But it's very relaxing, especially when you want to wind down in the evening. So they're both two incredible shows. And you mentioned there where you were saying about
Oh, pardon me. Sorry, that's very weird.
you mentioned there, sorry, about that you said you were playing piano, but you didn't enjoy it, and you gravitated towards drums. So, yeah, and you mentioned there that you liked particular drummers. You mentioned there Pink Floyd, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. I have Dark Side of the Moon myself, and it's an incredible record. But was there any drummers in particular that really inspired you, apart from my Uncle Graham, obviously?
Oh, of course, of course. Well, I when I was 12, so you're talking 1987. So, um, my first concert was in around 1982 or 83. My dad took me to see Paul Brady playing solo in the Olympia. And my dad he was a bit of a scallywag, and he saw that one of the boxes, the kind of expensive boxes that the royalty sit in was free. So we snuck in there and we watched the gig from there. But in 1985, I went to see ZZ Top. I don't know if you're familiar
Oh,
with a band called ZZ Top.
oh wow, ZZ Top. They have an incredible feel, don't they?
Brilliant band, and Eliminator had songs like Legs, Give Me All Your Lovin', TV Dinners. All of these great videos were coming out as well. They had a great image, and and their songs on that particular album are very kind of almost like an AC/DC record, where the drums are very metronomic and straight. So it was like, as a 12-year-old, I was able to put that cassette on, and I was able to navigate my way around the songs and the fills, and kind of, excuse me, just learned I learned that entire album by ear. So that was, I always accredit that record for, that's what enabled me to play good timing, you know. And I just and then, and like, I used to just play along to the, like, just to play along to the radio. I used to tape stuff off the radio. I'd be playing along to U2 records, or Cyndi Lauper. I'd be playing along to Madonna songs, not knowing that like the drummer on that was like Tony Thompson from Chic. So there was a lot of great drummers on. Anton Fig played on a lot of big hits in the 80s. So there's a lot of these great drummers. And drumming had become very kind of heavy on the two and the four on the snare. So
Yeah.
that very much influenced how I played. I didn't know what a ghost note was, I'd say, until I was about 16 or 17. I was playing a good 5 years. I'd no idea until I maybe heard the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then I started playing along to a record by theirs called Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which has Give It Away on it.
That's
And
an incredible album.
but and it's funny because even in the college I work in, like when people come in to apply to go there, like Chad Smith's name comes up all the time, and your Uncle Graham is a good friend of Chad Smith's.
Yeah.
And I've met Chad through Graham. Graham's always, every time he's over here, Graham will get him to do a master class somewhere, and Chad's really generous with his time. As Glenn said to me, because Glenn Hansard was playing with Chad with singer from Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder. They did a few.
Oh, Eddie Vedder, what an incredible singer as
Amazing,
well.
amazing. So they were off on tour in America, and but Graham said, yeah, Chad. Anytime I mention Graham, Chad would go, "Oh, Graham, great beard, great beard."
It's crazy.
He does have a great beard. As you can see, I'm still trying. I look like a 12-year-old trying to grow a beard. That's what I look like.
no comment.
No comment.
But I do have to say, regarding Graham, does have a great beard. So
He does
Chad's
have a
not
great beard.
Chad's not wrong there.
He's
But
not wrong. He's not
no,
wrong at all.
that's incredible to hear from. And then I have a question actually for you where you started on the music scene very early, and I think that's a good thing because you got a lot of experience then. But when the first time you stepped onto the music scene was when you played with PictureHouse. And what was it like joining a band like PictureHouse, which was pretty big at the time,
Yeah.
for a lot of people a very good band, and for some people just savior bands. So what was it like joining one of them?
Well, I was very lucky, and when I joined Picture House, they were their first album was already out. They'd recorded a few songs for their second album. So, like, one of the first things I did with Picture House was Sunburst, and that became a huge hit in Ireland. And I kind of, we at that point when I joined them, it was 1997, 98, and I was 20, 24, 25 years old, and we did a lot of touring. We were on the road 10, 11 months of the year. I like for the first 2 years, 3 years, it was very rare we were off, and we did 3 months touring with Meatloaf. We did 3 or 4 tours with the Corrs. We opened up for bands. We did tours with Marillion, who were like a prog rock band from the 80s. And we
Whoa.
also did a tour with Fish, who was their original singer. We actually did 2 tours back to back. We did a tour with Marillion, and then we went straight on tour with Fish, who was their original singer. So, and we opened, Alice Cooper. We did because Germany, they could have a rock band on and then a band like Picture House on. It didn't really matter, People just are huge music fans over there. But I suppose I was actually in a band with Dave Brown, the singer, called Hidden Faces when I was 14. So I didn't join Picture House till I was about 22. So we'd had a band, and my dad bumped into Dave one day, and I knew Dave when I was younger, and I hadn't seen him for a few years. And Dave said they were looking for. He was in a band at this point, and he was looking for a drummer. Dave was about 17 at the time. So my dad said, "Oh, my Johnny plays the drums," and Dave was a bit kind of, "He does not get up out of that," and
Yeah.
so he says, "No, no, come up to the house." So I had a year where I was playing on an acoustic drum kit, okay, and then my dad convinced me for my second year to buy this electronic piece of junk so I didn't play for my second year of drumming, even though I played every day at the age of 12. So 13 to 14, I didn't play at all, and I had to wait an entire year to get rid of that electronic drum kit. To then I got a job in a petrol station for £1 an hour, and the January after Christmas I went into the sales, and I basically paid for about 80% of my own drum kit. I think that's really important. If you're a guitar player, go out and work and pay for that guitar. It'll mean so much more to you than someone just giving it to you. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're obviously when you're young and you can't be working, that's fair enough. But I think there's a lot of pride taken in buying your own equipment. So so Dave came up to the house, and he was trying to be all cool. He's trying to be all cool, and he goes, "Show me what you got, kid." It was kind of like that. And
Yeah.
you know,
Typical kind of, one of those typical kind of nearly out of a film moments.
yeah, and so I did my best Larry Mullen impression. And this was April. This was April 1980, 88 or 89, and I'd only been back playing for a few months, really. Do you know what I mean? So he came up to me on a Monday, and then the next day he said, "Well, we're rehearsing tomorrow night." So I jumped in his van with my drums, and we went up near Blessington, up to our guitar player's house, Ian, and we rehearsed. I think the Tuesday night and the Wednesday night, and that following Saturday I was out playing a gig in Dublin. I didn't. It wasn't even on my radar that I'd be playing a gig. I just thought I was going into a room to jam with a bunch of guys. The thoughts of even playing a gig had not even come into my head yet. Do you know what I mean?
Wow. Very sudden then.
Very, very sudden. And once we started gigging, we went, and we were gigging a lot around Ireland, and the two lads in the band eventually fired Dave, which Dave always says, "Yeah, great move, lads. Fire your songwriter." you know. So we got a new singer, but in 1990 in December we ended up in Japan. Playing in Tokyo to 15,000 people, which again, I just left school and all of a sudden I'm in Tokyo for 10 days, and I'm just this kid from South Dublin, cannot believe my luck, also being told by my teachers in school that I was wasting my life and I'd never have a career in music, and I was wasting my time. But 6 months later, when I left their crappy school, I was in Japan and I've made a career out of music.
Well, you were mentioned earlier that you are head of drumming and also you're the principal, now director of drumming at BIM.
Yeah.
And that is really cool. A great position. And it's great that you have an outlook like that, that you can make a career in music. Because some people feel that you can't, whereas you believe in people. And I think that's great that you can be part of somewhere like BIM with that outlook.
Yeah, it's been just incredible to see, some of the drummers that have come out of there are musicians. Tom Cole from the Fontaines. I'm obviously going to mention the ones that are doing really well commercially, like Dermot Brennan's with the Murder Capital. Those lads are doing great with their bands. And, where there's other guys that are, just really, really great technical drummers with great feel. Rob Kennedy's, come in and he's just a virtuoso drummer. He's amazing. And he's been out touring with Daniel O'Donnell recently. So you never know what kind of gig you're going to get. So yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about the college is seeing all these young people and seeing relationships blossom. And I always say to them as well, if I can make a living from music, any of you can. Because the only college that was in Dublin was the Ballyfermot Rock School back in the early 90s. And I never went there. A lot of my friends did, and a lot of people's kind of relationships blossomed from there, a lot of musicians. I had a few drum lessons when I was 14, because what you got to remember, Logan, like if I wanted to learn how to play 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon, I'd have to find a guy who knew how to play it to then show me, teach it to me, and transcribe it for me. And I had a great drum teacher called Dave McCune. And Dave was, and if I didn't practice and I came down, like he'd read you the riot act. He'd say, "Hang on a second, your parents are paying for this. You've a obligation to come down here and not waste my time." And that was a kind of huge kick up the butt.
Whoa.
So I always made sure I was prepared for his lessons, and I still have my manuscript book over there with all my drum books. I might have went to Dave for about 6 months, but other than that, I've had a few lessons here and there. But I always just focused on playing in bands. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow, though, that's an incredible story. And then you mentioned there you've played with you even PictureHouse and Hidden Face already. That's at 22 you started with PictureHouse, but then playing with the Frames, you played drums and went on tour with them from 2003 to 2008.
Yeah,
And the thing is with the Frames, anyone who loves Irish rock will know the Frames.
yeah.
And the Frames, the thing that I like about them is that they have a very unique sound. So I wanted to ask you, because they're very different to a lot of bands, what was it like adjusting and becoming one of the members of an iconic Irish rock band?
Well, I mean, again, I use the word privilege a lot because my own I've kind of exceeded my own expectations and played with bands. Again, like love playing with Mundy. Lear have been a band I've been playing with since '97 as well. They're a very popular band in Dublin, with some great musicians. But playing with the Frames is probably it's definitely up there with one of the hardest gigs I've ever had. Because I had a great conversation with Glenn the last time we rehearsed for those shows, like, and he was talking about being present and being in the moment, and it was a very nice conversation. Because where a lot of bands will, it's all on click track and backing tracks, and they go out and they play in the same set every night. With the Frames, you'd never know what was going to happen. And people would get out of the audience and sing, and and I went to see Glenn before Christmas playing Vicar Street. And I made that realization that not one Glen gig or Frames gig are ever the same. Every night is different, and but what actually happened was I was only supposed to join them for an Irish tour. Actually, in the very far corner there, you can't see it, but it's in the very far corner. And they're the first Frames dates I ever did, you know. And we did a couple of nights in the Olympia. We toured around Ireland, and I was only supposed to do those gigs, and that was it. And then a month later, in January, we got asked to go out and open for Damien Rice around America. So we did 6 weeks in America with him. It was a brilliant, brilliant tour. And that brought the Frames popularity up in America. So all of a sudden, I joined this band like PictureHouse that was kind of starting to do really, really well, and I became their touring drummer, whereas Graham recorded the albums Burn the Maps and The Cost. So we had a nice little kind of arrangement where Graham was doing his thing and go in and record with the lads, and I became their kind of live drummer. That might seem a little bit weird for some people, but it worked really, really well.
Oh, I get it. That makes sense. Sorry, sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, no. So I, for someone who expected to work with a band for 2 weeks, I worked for them for 4 years. And it's always and what happened really was I remember we did a show on Vicar Street. It was New Year's Eve 2007, and Glenn had been nominated for his Oscar, and I I'm not saying I knew he was going to win it, but I thought, I felt very strongly that he was going to win it. But I also felt that if he did win it, it would kind of be the end of the Frames, really, because you couldn't turn up the opportunity to tour with Marquetta and tour, so you're always disappointed when a gig is over, because you can get a little bit complacent and you think it's going to last forever, but it doesn't. So and that can take a little bit of adjusting, I suppose, when it's over, because then you're like, okay, I don't have a regular gig now, so what will I do? Go back and join PictureHouse. That's what I did. Yeah, after 10 years I went back and joined PictureHouse. Yeah, but again, like, we're all friends, and I played on Colin McAnumra's first solo record. I mean, I think he's just a phenomenal musician. What he does with that fiddle is just special, you know. Well, we did some great shows. We did some great tours. We did the Point. It's now called the Three Arena. We did a great show in Marley Park one year. That was a real highlight. I remember on the last tour we did, we played the Henry Fonda Theatre in Los Angeles. That was a good night. So many great nights, so many great gigs. Too many to mention, and the intensity of that band is something very unique. There's an intensity to that band. There really is. And I'll tell you, you have to bring it. You bring it every night, and you do. And I think for me, it's been one of the most challenging gigs I've ever had, and one of the most rewarding. They've all been rewarding in their own way.
That's a great way to put a gig, because gigs can be, I know from past interviewees, people say that gigs can be very stressful. But then I think at the same time of being stressful, I feel like if I was a musician, I'd be a bit apprehensive about it. Like I am about most things. That a lot of gigs are very exciting to be, but you're always anxious for the first couple of songs. But then afterwards, I know I've been to a couple of gigs. After the first couple of songs, you just know it's going to be a great night. And then along with the Frames and PictureHouse, as you were saying there, two amazing bands. I want to move on now to that you played with multiple musicians, including a previous interviewee and good friend of mine, Thomas Walsh, who actually recently released an album called The Rest is History. So make sure to check that out. But how did you two meet?
I met Thomas. Well, we call him Wally, right? That's what pretty much anyone who's known him for. And I met Wally through Keith Farrell, played bass on the Duckworth Lewis and Pugwash stuff. And Keith was from Inchicore, and Wally was from Drimna, so they knew each other. And Wally was doing some session work in a studio that I was doing some work in, and Wally actually recommended Keith Farrell for my band at the time when I was about 17 years old. So I got to know him and I got to know all that Inchicore crew. And Wally's one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. He's hilarious. And we started working on Am and T, the first album in 1997, and we recorded some of the drums in a club in town, and then we took all the equipment because this was before Pro Tools or any digital, any of that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of leads and desks and microphones everywhere, and excuse me, I was living in the Dublin mountains. So we had a room on the top floor of the house, a big room, and there was a lovely balcony overlooking Dublin city. And we just set everything up there for months on end. And we kind of made that record, and it was, and again, it was our first time making a record. I think it was probably, I mean, I worked in a lot of recording studios, but this was an album. We were making an album, and that was very exciting.
So you actually, before this question, you were mentioning a lot about gigs. So it's interesting to share your studio experience. And it seems like a very nice experience actually playing with Pugwash. Because if you haven't heard of Pugwash, it's actually a very jolly band and very jolly songs. So if you're looking for a mood boost, definitely check out Pugwash. But do you have a preference to play recording towards an album, or do you prefer playing live on stage?
That's a great question. Well, I always say they're two totally different beasts. When you're when you're playing live, um, there's that element of just being in the moment. Being in the moment. It could be making eye contact with somebody in the audience, or making eye contact with someone in the band, or something. Just a moment happens. Maybe someone even makes a mistake, and that makes everybody laugh. Being in the studio is a bit more. You're kind of analyzing. It's more analytical. You're analyzing what you're playing. What I learned very early on about recording was that keep it simple. Like if you're playing too much stuff, it clutters up the music. So I always found I've got this cool new feel. I'll throw it into a song, and you'd listen back to it and go, well, it just doesn't sound right there. So I think I'd always come at a song with a load of ideas, and then I end up peeling them all back, and sometimes I end up playing no fills and just playing something really, really simple. I'm not a big. I don't overplay. I don't play lots of fills. I don't think so anyway. I'm more of a backbeat driven drummer. But also, my goal is to play for the music. But being in the studio and like a live gig can be a great feeling, and then you walk away from that. Whereas, you go into the studio, you can walk away with an incredible song that you've worked on, and you have that forever. Do you know what I mean? So there's the lovely long
Yeah.
lasting effect of being in the studio, and definitely when something comes together and it sounds great, it's I get very excited listening back to stuff that I played on, and coincidentally, a lot of people, with PictureHouse, we would go in for 2 weeks and we'd rehearse every day, and we'd dissect every song with our producer, and he'd help arrange the songs. And we did that very much with Sunburst. Sunburst was written by three different people: Dave Brown, Duncan Maitland, and Pete Glenister. And Pete Glenister wrote "This Is the Rhythm of the Night," which is a big dance hit. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, Pete's a great songwriter, great producer, great guy. We all still keep in touch, and so that's the way we would create. And then sometimes I'd go in to do a pugwash thing, and there'd already be like maybe some bass and guitar recorded and a vocal. Like we just recorded the drums to like Thomas's acoustic guitar and vocal. That's all I recorded to. So there wasn't even a full band there. So and then recently, a few years ago, I did a record with an American songwriter called John Murray, and it was being produced by John Parrish. John Parrish is a fairly well-known producer and musician in his own right. He's worked with PJ Harvey for years, and he's produced a lot of brilliant, brilliant records. And well, we went into a place called Rockfield in Wales, which is where Bohemian Rhapsody was recorded, and the first two Oasis albums. And we went in, we didn't rehearse, we had no demos, and within 5 days, we went in at 10 in the morning till 9 o'clock every night, and we just tried to come up with ideas. And within 5 days, we had a record. We had the
Whoa.
bones of an album, and I'd never worked like that. And I was working with people I didn't know, and I was thinking, you better produce the goods, pal. You know. And when I arrived at the studio, I'd been up for something like 47 hours because I was gigging the day before, and I came home, went straight to the airport, then had to get to the studio and set up and start recording that day till that evening. So it was exhausting. But again, it was one of the best recording experiences I've ever had.
Wow. And then regarding recording and everything, you know a lot about it. And regarding drumming and stuff, um, drumming in general, you are actually, and this is very interesting. We were speaking earlier about BIM. You are the head of drums and the principal director of drums at BIM Music Institute Dublin. So obviously you were mentioning there seeing people coming out of BIM and coming in and really good drummers. What is it like being in such an important part to an incredible institute and being such an important part to young drummers' lives?
Well, I think I speak for everyone that works there when we say, like, we really, really do our best to make it as good an experience for anyone that wants to study there. We work very, very hard. Um, and, I think having worked there, and that job came at a very kind of time where I was kind of professionally in limbo a little bit. I was 30, maybe 34, 35, and I was kind of thinking where's my career going? And it comes back once again to your I'd be lost without your Uncle Graham. Seriously. Um Graham got me into Spring Break, who I'm still gigging with 16 years later. Graham recommended myself and Dave Hingerty for BIM. And what happened was there was a position of head of drums, and Graham didn't want to do it, and Dave Hingerty didn't want to do it. So I kind of, speaking of the coin toss, or draw. But I was so grateful to get that job, and to be perfectly honest, what it made me realize was I was given this big encyclopedia book of all the course notes, and it made me realize how little I knew about drums. I knew a lot about music, but I really had to study different areas of drumming that I wasn't familiar with. How do you play a New Orleans second line drum beat? Or playing some Tower of Power funk patterns. There was just so much, you know, there was. I really had to get stuck in and teach myself. Basically, I had to teach myself this stuff so I could teach it and dig a little bit deeper. And over the few years, I've written different courses and stuff like that. So a lot of work goes into that behind the scenes. And I'm a drummer just like everyone else in the classroom. So I'm saying to them, if I can do it, anybody can. But you have to have a good work ethic. And people don't just hire the drummer; they hire the person too. So you got to bring a good attitude, and you got to have a sense of fun about you, and you got to be serious about what you're doing. But you know, and you got to make sure the people that are hiring you are confident in what you're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that is very important. And I know BIM means a lot to so many different musicians who are either in there at the moment or coming out. So it's great to hear that you're there with that mindset, helping young musicians. And actually, I want to speak about something different because I know we've been talking about music, but now I want to move on to your podcast, which is a very interesting title, The Brief Encounter. So, before we delve into what the podcast is about, anything about that, where did you get the name?
Okay, so I kind of got it from two places. There's a great movie called Brief Encounter, a David Lean black and white movie, which I remember watching as when I was young and on a kind of rainy Saturday afternoon, and I liked him as a director, David Lean. But really, where I got the name from was my dad was in the sign industry during the 80s and 90s. So he used to do shop front signs. So it could be a pub or a kebab house. My dad designed Abracababra. So, that was one of his designs with the palm
Wow.
tree and stuff like that. Yeah, so he designed that. Um, and but he did a kebab shop that was out in kind of Dunleary, and he called the kebab shop Brief Encounter, which I just thought was a bizarre name for a kebab shop. But I suppose, you know, when it's 12 o'clock at night and you're coming home and you're hungry, you have a kebab, most of it goes down the front of your shirt. That could be considered a brief encounter. So I thought I would call it the brief encounter because it is a brief encounter with somebody. Like here, we're going to talk for an hour or so, and I think the reason I started it was I was probably getting a little bit nostalgic, you know, at my age, and just looking back on the career I've had, and sometimes wondering, you know, you can be wondering where's my next gig coming from, or am I gonna do it, and that's going to be creatively satisfying to me or musically satisfying. And thankfully, stuff still comes in that's really, really interesting, you know. So, you know, for me, I've been very lucky that people have introduced me to people I didn't know. Like, for example, I interviewed Donnie Wynn, who was Robert Palmer's drummer for 35 years. And, you know, he's had an amazing career and he's an incredible drummer. But I wasn't that familiar with who he was. And we talked for I think we talked for 3 hours one night, you know? So even when I switched off the podcast recording, we just stayed online because this was during lockdown. I've interviewed members of the Frames, Brona Gallagher, the actress. I have a very good friend, the actor Jim Bartley, who played Bella Doyle on Fair City for 35 years. Jim has had an extraordinary career, and I've done some extra interviews with him that we filmed professionally. Excuse me, in the hope of maybe doing a short documentary on his career. I suppose sometimes with the lesser known people, they've just had extraordinary lives and extraordinary careers, and I find that very interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it should be recognised to a degree, you know, because people can be forgotten about very easily now, you know. You
Yeah,
know,
I totally agree.
when you're hot, and when you're not. You know, there's a bit of that, particularly in music, you know. I think during the lockdown, talking to songwriters especially, because songwriters struggled during the lockdowns and stuff like that. There was no gigs to be played, or it was very hard to put records out. You know, so I think it was quite therapeutic on that front, you know. And I suppose I just wanted to give the impression, because some of the interviews I've done, I'd be sitting in the corner of a pub having a pint, you know, and I tried to make it like that, like two lads having a pint and a bit of a chat, you know, about
Yeah.
reminiscing about the good old days. So you know, and in podcast terms, it's not a revolutionary in any way, but for me, and I think with any artistic endeavor, if you do it for you, if people like it, great. I thought I would have had 5 downloads on my first one, and I got 300 or 500. I couldn't believe it, you know.
Wow.
So
That's
it's been great, and I have to go back to it. I do have to go back to it, you know.
well, I can't wait. Well, I can't wait to catch up on all the episodes. Um, just you've had an incredible career, and what you're doing at the moment is so inspiring. So, what I want to ask for my last question, because it's been a great interview, but before we go, I wanted to ask for young drummers or musicians in general, are there any tips that you would give, or any words of advice that you'd give to them?
Yeah, put the hours in. There's no magic pill that one day you're going to wake up and be able to play all the rudiments at 200 BPM. You know, put the hours in. You know, like for me, if somebody shows up for a class and I'm, you know, talking about New Orleans or Zigaboo Modalist and the meters, you know, go off and research that stuff and get behind your kit and play. I was very lucky growing up. I get out of bed and I'd be practically sitting on my drum kit getting out of bed. And I was lucky with my neighbours, and I played every day for 3 to 5 hours. I just played, and I learned songs by ear, you know, and just played and played, and then when I moved out of home when I was 18 or 19, I didn't have anywhere to play. So that's been my biggest challenge of my life, is not having a practice space. So you find pockets of time and a place here, or I might use the college during the summer when there's no classes. So having a practice room, that's why again I'm envious of Graham and his practice room there playing away. I'd love to have something like that, you know. But you have to put the hours in, you know, and just have to have a good work ethic. If you know, and if you're a easy person to get along with and you play well and show up on time, show up with the right gear. But if you're a young person striving to get better, don't spend your hours just flicking through YouTube. Get behind your kit, start and play, because that's the only way you'll get better. If you're playing stuff that's like is really good, you're not learning it because you can already play it. So try to play the stuff that's hard so you can step up to the next level, And I don't get a lot of time to practice. Somebody asked me what my practice routine was, and most of the time I'm learning songs or I'm learning material to teach for classes and things like that, So, but when I do get time to practice, it's always a luxury and it's great.
That's an incredible piece of advice, and I know that actually works for not only drums. I play guitar myself, and I just think for any instrument, it's a great piece of advice. So thank you so much, Johnny, for that, because that is incredible. And thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Logan. I feel very lucky to have been a guest. I really appreciate it. Great talking to you.
Pleasure is all mine. It's been amazing talking to you.
Brilliant, mate. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Nice
Bye,
one.
Johnny.
All right. Take it easy. See you, mate.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Logan Sounds Off. You can follow me on X, Facebook and Instagram at Logan Sounds Off. And don't forget to subscribe and not miss any more cool episodes. Bye guys!